One of my favorite things about June is the garden really starts to explode. The flowers are blooming, trellises are filling, and tomato harvesting has begun. Hi, I'm Bree. I live in Kansas Zone 6B, and today I'm going to show you guys what my garden is currently looking like in the month of June. And without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump right in. Okay, so as always, we're going to start right here at the very front of my garden. So this is my garlic bed, or was my garlic bed. If you didn't catch last week's video, I harvested all of my garlic, which I will show you guys in a second. It is curing in my shed. I actually plan to plant this entire thing of black beans, but I only had enough seeds to plant half of it with black beans. So I actually scattered the other half just full of dill because I'm going to need a ton of dill when I start to pickle, and the cucumbers are going crazy as well. So I'm really excited to see that a lot of the beans came up. I think they may have had like 2 or 3 not pop up, so that's some really good germination. Then right over here to my right, if you have not watched a single video since the last garden tour, I have since harvested all of my cabbage. And I will note, I don't know if I would really plant as much cabbage as I did this spring in springs to come, just because you really have to harvest all of those cool crops at once. You don't really get to scatter it like you do in the fall. And for me, I just don't need that much cabbage, to be honest. So I blanched it, it's in the freezer, and now I can just kind of add it to little soups and stuff I do throughout the year. I didn't want to risk canning cabbage. It was one of those things that canning cabbage just really didn't seem that good. So I have planted my zucchini in here since, and somehow I have no idea how it happened. I did find a little caterpillar in here, and he started to eat some of my leaves. Either way, typically when things are covered in the hoop house, like my cabbage and my zucchini, they don't really get messed with those really hardcore pests that are hard to manage. These 2 beds are officially replanted, and my whole plan for this bed that the garlic was in is to have these beans, harvest the beans, then turn around in the fall time and plant it full of garlic again. We'll see how that plan goes, but that's the plan as of right now. Other than these 2 garden beds, I do have a few sunflowers that are doing really well. I also have my blueberry plant over here that only gets like a handful of little blueberries at a time. Not even a handful. I'm getting like 2 to 3 at a time. But they are definitely some of the best blueberries I've ever had in my life. I'll save that other one, that's right from my husband. I also have these suckers that I ended up cutting off of my indeterminate plants over there for my tomatoes. You know what, I went ahead and rooted them in some water, planted them, I staked them, and then I'm actually just gonna Florida weave this entire area. You know, if I get nothing from it, this is just going to be an extra bonus. And then, I mean, if I don't get anything from it, no hard feelings. But if I do get something from it, there we go. I will reap the benefit. I mean, if it does nothing, so be it. I'm also doing a really similar thing with the strawberry. So I started to cut off some of these runner plants, and then I've just started to plant them in the holes that just didn't end up taking. So we'll see if they take off. If they don't work this way, I'm gonna go ahead and cut off more of the runners and try to root them inside under less harsh conditions, just since it is so hot currently. And then of course we have all the flowers that I just showed you guys, and I must say this is the first year I've dabbled a lot more in flowers. I've previously really just grown sunflowers, and then I had a few different like combo mixes, but I've never really just planted flowers throughout. And today I saw so many butterflies, which was really exciting. One thing I wish I would have done, so since I live in Kansas and it is always windy, I do have quite a few tomato cages left from last year. I think I have maybe like 5 left. I wish I would have caged these zinnias especially. I did go ahead and stake them. I thought if I caged them, I might end up cutting off or just breaking off some of these flowers. So unfortunately, like you can see, they just kind of poke out. I think if I would have used tomato cages on these, especially with my wind, they would have worked really well. So in future years, I think I'm going to use some of my tomato cages for some flowers. And speaking of tomatoes again, I actually planted out another little baby tomato here since my flower ended up just not taking. I think I planted another polar bear zinnia there, and I was like, you know, I could plant another zinnia there, or I could just plant more tomatoes, which is a little bit more practical since I do have a smaller garden. And when I say smaller, I know my garden isn't small, but it is small on the expansion of garden I would like to have one day. So let me show you guys this garlic. You'll have to ignore my messy shed at the moment because this was really organized until I needed a place to cure the garlic. So if you didn't watch last week's video, pretty much I ended up getting a lot of really nice looking garlic. This was my very first time ever growing it. I'm pretty proud. I did get a few that were very tiny like this. They're still usable. I am not too worried, but overall I have a really good attack plan for this upcoming year, but very, very impressed for my first year, I gotta say. The other day, me and my husband were just standing outside and I was like, you know what? If someone was like, what should I add to my garden this year if they were on a budget? I was like, they should add a trellis. I have to say, I wish I would have started adding vertical gardening a lot sooner in my garden than I did. I really didn't start dabbling in this until last year, but like, how magical is this trellis? And it only cost me $40 last year. Just wait, if you have not seen any of my tours yet this year, I have a whole trellis tunnel that is starting to fill up as well, which I honestly think will probably be my favorite part of the garden here, like in a month's time. So either way, these are the Kentucky pole beans, and I have noticed that once they got to about here, I don't know if you can see that or not, I don't know if they're going to completely cover this or not. I think they end up will. They've really started to take off though in the last 2 weeks. One thing I've been dealing with though with these beans, if you can't see up close, is I've been dealing with a lot of just blight in my garden, and it's been something I've been tackling. I have noticed that my little combination of neem oil and apple cider vinegar has worked wonders. What I've been doing is a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of neem with a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar per gallon of water. And that acidicness from the apple cider vinegar really helps the disease subside. It won't grow on the leaf anymore because it just kind of kills it because it doesn't like that acidicness. And then the neem also just really helps the plant in general. So that combination I've really been enjoying. I kind of just researched it real fast and was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I've been spraying my plants about every other day as long as it doesn't rain, just to keep up with it because I've been dealing with a lot of disease. So I've had to clip off quite a few leaves. Again, I've been spraying a ton, but it is starting to look like it's coming out of the thick of things. So hopefully the green beans are gonna start producing here pretty soon. I have a few flowers. I do have a few bush bean plants that are producing, but yeah, it's kind of the spiel on the trellis. So I'm definitely not going to show you every sunflower in the garden because that would probably take far too long because I've planted way too many. I've planted 3 different varieties this year. I have planted Goldie Teddy Bear, Goldie Honey. Something like that. It's something like that. Sunset Beauty, and then Russian Mammoth. So these Russian Mammoths are really starting to get big. I am 5'6" for reference, so this has to be at least 6 foot tall already, and they are not forming their flowers yet. So this sucker is probably going to get like 10 to 12 feet tall. I hope. I really want a super tall sunflower. I'm going to have a few because I already have like 4 this size, if you can't tell. The Sunset Beauty and then also the Goldie Honey Bear, they don't get that tall. I think they get to about 5 or 6 feet tall, but it is just really cool to have sunflowers doing really well this year. I always had sunflowers, and then last year it was like my worst year for sunflowers. It made me so sad. And this year I'm really starting to redeem myself. And I wanted to mention that whole combination of apple cider vinegar and neem is honestly the main reason why I think my sunflowers are still existing, because they have been hit hard with disease and ants and things just getting at them. And I must say, I think they look pretty good. All right, so let's go through the 5 beds plus cloth planters that I have going on throughout this whole space. So to start, this is my cloth planter from Bootstrap Farmer. I really like this. It was a 4x4 and it's only around $30. It's great, cost efficient, especially for garden beds. I really like it. It's done very well. I have 2 of my Oyas in here. The last 2 I had, I put the smalls in there. Those are good for a 2x2 space, which works for a 4x4. And then I have some more flowers, sunflower, of course. And then this bed has been really interesting, guys. So this is my cayenne pepper bed, and I will actually show you one of my cayenne pepper plants that I accidentally planted in the bell peppers. I have no idea how that happened, but for some reason, these plants are the only ones that really haven't took off yet. They're really starting to as of like the last 2 weeks, but they've just stayed small. Like I am starting to get fruit on them, but when you see the other cayenne plant in the other bed, it's like triple this size. And what's crazy is this was the bed full of new compost. The other bed is a 3-year-old garden bed that I amended. So I honestly have no idea what's going on. I mean, these could have kind of got stunted, but I did plant out all of my pepper plants at the same time. And then I also found this really interesting. So this is my pink celery. And what's really crazy is I've had one of them go to seed, which honestly, I have no idea why or how this could have happened, other than maybe that little area just dried out somehow, which I don't know, because again, I have Oyas everywhere. So if you don't know what an Oya is, it is a terracotta vessel you fill with water, and the plants can essentially just water themselves as I supplement things like fertilizer, compost, stuff like that. I do top water just to make sure those nutrients seep down, but I absolutely love the Oyas. It's really saved me from having to water these spaces all the time. I only water them like every few days. So then going over here, those were all cayennes. Then I have jalapenos, banana peppers, serranos, and paprikas. So I believe that's the order. I did a terrible job at labeling this year, and that is my fault. And then I have carrots, and then I have dragon tongue bush beans, a volunteer tomato plant I randomly found. So I'm just gonna let this guy live its best life, and we'll see how he does in the little crack in the middle of my walkway. So then moving over here, this is where my bell pepper area is, and you can see I do have a few forming. That one's a little cutie. Either way, the one I wanted to show you, this is clearly a cayenne pepper plant. You can tell the difference from the leaves. I am getting cayennes over here, but do you see this plant compared to the ones you just saw? I have absolutely no idea. These peppers in general are just doing so much better. And what's crazy is this area gets more sun. These beds are brand new. This bed's a 3-year-old bed, and I planted this bed like out. This is a bunch of bush beans that I am starting to get some beans. We have some more sunflowers. We have garlic chives, nasturtiums. I mean, this is a crowded bed, but yet somehow everything's doing wonderful. Okay, so this middle garden bed has to be probably my favorite garden bed, or will be my favorite garden bed of the year. So I actually found a picture of the very first garden we ever did, and this is the garden bed from that photo, and I will just show you here. I think it's just crazy how big my garden has gotten 4 years, but I absolutely love it. But one thing that's exciting is the pumpkins are finally getting big enough where they are going to start latching onto this trellis, and in no time, this thing is going to be full. This probably sits 8 to 9 feet tall is my guess. So imagine that with a bunch of big pumpkin foliage. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. The other thing in this garden bed I'm really excited to show you is the broccoli plant is finally starting to dry out. So I actually told my husband the other day, I thought it'd be a good idea to harvest all of these broccoli pods and count all of the seeds for a video and let you know how many seeds I get off of one broccoli plant. Because if you did not know, these little pods here can hold anywhere from, I believe, 10 to 20 seeds a piece. And then, I mean, look how many pods are on this plant. I'm going to be getting thousands of seeds without a doubt. So if you want to see that video, let me know. I will definitely put in the work for this purpose. And in the last 8x4 garden bed, we have all of the onions. And if you can see here, look, they are actually starting to bulb up. So this is my very first year doing onions as well. And so far, so good. I think I might end up getting a few that just don't do as well. But I mean, we'll see. It still seems pretty early. There's nothing really falling over really. And everything looks really healthy. So give this another probably month to 2 months and we'll see where these onions are at. But either way, like, I'm so excited about onions. I was just really impressed by garlic in general, because garlic and onions, I mean, how often do you use garlic and onions? All the time, at least in my house, we do. So garlic and onions are definitely that thing I really want to try to master. I mean, I obviously know that my first year I'm not going to master it, but I am pretty impressed so far with what I've done. So I have more cloth planters around. I planted some bush beans right here. Then I have all of this beautiful dill that is actually going to seed already as well. This has been a really nice attraction for the butterflies. I am just going to go ahead and let this go to seed. I don't think I'll be able to can any of this before it really starts to just take off and go to seed. So I'm going to let it go to seed, harvest the seed. That way I just don't have to plant dill seed. And by then, hopefully the dill I planted over in the old garlic bed will really start to take off. Then I have some oregano, and I'm actually going to start to dry this along with some of the peppermint probably here this week. I'm really excited to dry peppermint for tea. I also have a Cosmo here, some parsley, zinnia, and then more oregano, thyme, rosemary, and sage. Another thing I've been really impressed with in the garden is this hyssop lately. Just look at these plants. They are absolutely beautiful. So hyssop you can use for teas and different tinctures and things like that. I personally have never used it. I accidentally started to plant this in my garden 4 years ago. Me and my husband honestly had no idea what we were doing. We just picked up a bunch of seed packets and we saw purple flowers and thought it was lavender. Up until last year, when I was really digging really hardcore into research, I realized that this was something called hyssop. And even though I thought it was lavender for all those years, I don't even know why I did, because this smells like straight up licorice. So I've never made it into tea simply because I personally am not a licorice fan, but it is part of like the mint licorice family. But it does have a lot of health benefits that I've been reading about in my little tincture book. So I might dive into it a little bit more this year. Typically, I just let it reseed itself and it comes back, and honestly, I have like probably 50 plants throughout my entire yard, like between front and backyard. We like it. The bees love it, and it really helps attract them. So we leave it. All right, so let's dive into the tomato area, and there is a lot to uncover here with the tomatoes. So these tomatoes here, these are Roma tomatoes, and they are looking absolutely amazing. They're doing really good. Of course, I am getting some that are ripening already, but there is something with these ones and the cloth planters and the cloth planters alone. So I've grown in these big, I think these are 30-gallon cloth planters now for 4 years straight. And I probably should have mended these soil bags just a little bit more. So either way, I've been having a problem with some blossom end rot. I have noticed it starting to go away. I think this is just one I forgot to pick off when I initially saw them. But either way, this is a nutrition imbalance. And once you fix it, it tends to go away. Typically every year I have some type of problem with blossom end rot, but once you start to feed your plants, typically it goes away pretty fast. With how big these Romas got during the really hot and muggy time of early spring, I also was cutting off quite a bit of blight. So one thing you will notice is the underneath is quite clipped off, and that's honestly not a problem. It's actually really good for airflow, and I have just been managing that. One thing I implemented at the very beginning is cutting off any suckers that were below the very first set of blossoms, and that by far has really made a big difference, at least in my opinion. So there's definitely a few things I want to show you guys here over in the indeterminate area, and one of them being my little mistake that I made 2 months ago at this point. So I was pruning off things and I accidentally topped this plant by accident, and I went ahead and just left it in the ground because I knew it would send off suckers, and those suckers would just go ahead and take off, which I was right. So this plant is actually just regrowing from what I left. I am starting to get more flower buds. I have little tomatoes growing. So if you have that problem where you accidentally topped your plant, don't worry, your tomato plant is going to be pretty resistant and it's going to continue to grow. That's definitely something I wasn't too sure on. I thought about pulling the plant, but I was like, you know, I have so many tomato plants this year, I'll just use it as an experiment. So the one thing that I find absolutely crazy is these have to already be like 6 to 7 feet tall. So my cattle panels only go to about 5 feet. And I knew I was going to have to extend these up, but I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. So I actually got all of these stakes, tied them up really good. And now from here on up, I'm actually going to Florida weave this entire area. It's just a cheap way to be able to trellis these things and to be able to keep these tomatoes growing. But honestly, I can't believe these tomatoes are already this big. I also am very, very, very impressed with San Marzano tomatoes. So look at this. This tomato is massive for a paste variety, and I totally understand why people love San Marzano tomatoes, because I have just fallen in love. Like, these clusters are just beautiful and their plants are doing so well. I do have one other tomato plant variety, and this is the pink bumblebee. This is a cherry tomato variety that actually is kind of striped, if you can see right there. It's a really, really beautiful tomato, and I have all of these beautiful clusters. And one thing I love about the indeterminates is you prune off so much that it's just very clean looking, and I love that you can just see all the tomatoes versus the aromas, because I mean, you can really dig into one of these plants and find a tomato you accidentally left until it's super ripe. I also am finally starting to get a few marigold blooms, which, look how beautiful of an orange that color is. All right, guys, so I have one more area that I would like to show you in my garden. Well, it's the only area left in my garden, but it's the area that I call Trellis Ellis, which is my trellis tunnel full of cucumber, cantaloupe, and loofah. So I'm gonna need you guys just to imagine this real fast. Imagine this completely covered with foliage, and then you just get to walk through it. Like, how magical is this going to be in just a few weeks' time? So at the very beginning, we have my Boston pickling cucumbers, which are really starting to flower. So I bet in about 3 weeks' time, we will have some cucumbers. That is a little start of a little baby there. And then we have my cantaloupe, which is really starting to take off. This plant was maybe only up to here by this time last week. So you can see just how fast in a week, once something really starts to trellis, how fast it can go. The only thing in this area that I could not get is the loofahs on this side. I was having a really hard time with things eating them, and I could not get them to get any bigger than like maybe a little seedling, and then they would just get ate. So I'm gonna try to plant some either cucumbers over here or some Kentucky pole beans, just because I really can't plant loofah at this point anymore. So if you do not know, loofah is a very long variety. If you want to plant it, you pretty much need to get it going as soon as you can, which these plants were going at the very beginning once frost was over. So these will probably really start to take off sometime this week. They're really going now, but they have to dry on the vine, and they just take a really long time. So if you don't have a long gardening season, you can't really do too much with it. So I hope I get some loofahs. So far this year, this has been a challenge for me. I had some beer out here because I found slugs were one of the reasons why these were getting eaten. So if you don't know, beer makes a trap for slugs. They will just go toward the beer instead of your plant, and then they die. Well, guys, that is what the garden is currently looking like here toward the end of June. I'm so excited that we're stepping into July. July is officially one of my favorite months. Once I started gardening, I really started to love July and August for how crazy and beautiful and wild the garden gets. And we are just approaching that season. So there is some crazy gardening adventures to come here in the next few weeks. I'll see you guys in a month's time for the July garden tour. But until then, I will see you guys all next week. Bye.